The xenobiologists had called it Carthax 7, a death world where evolution had crafted nightmares. From flesh and fang, when the research vessel Constellation's Edge suffered catastrophic engine failure. In the planet's orbit, the crew had mere minutes to evacuate. In the chaos, two pods launched separately, tumbling through the atmosphere like dice thrown by an indifferent god. Khaleesi's pod crashed in the southern hemisphere, its impact carving a smoking scar through the violet undergrowth. She emerged bruised but alive, her emergency pack intact. The air was breathable, barely thick with moisture, and the cloying scent of decay. Around her, the jungle pulsed with life that wanted her dead. 300 kilometers north, Camden pulled himself from his own wreckage. His pod had fared worse. The emergency beacon was shattered, his supplies scattered across a rocky ravine. But he had his hands, his mind, and the stubborn human refusal to accept extinction. Neither knew the other had survived. Khaleesi's first night taught her respect. The creatures of Carthax 7 hunted in the darkness, six-legged things with crystalline eyes that reflected her campfire like distant stars. She'd tried hiding her heat signature, tried staying silent, but they found her anyway. It was only when she'd built her fire higher, impossibly high, feeding it with resinous wood that popped and crackled like gunfire, that they'd hesitated. The flames reached for meters into the canopy, and the predators had retreated to the shadows, watching, waiting, confused by prey that made itself so visible. "You don't know what to do with us, do you?" She'd whispered to the glowing eyes. "We're not supposed to exist." Camden learned different lessons. Without fire-starting equipment, he'd spent his first day constructing a shelter from the bones of something massive and long dead. The skeletal ribs formed a natural dome, and he'd woven the gaps shut with a fibrous vine that oozed caustic sap. It burned his hands, but it also burned anything that tried to force its way through. On the third night, a pack of predators, serpentine bodies thick as tree trunks, covered in chitinous plates, had attempted to breach his shelter. They'd recoiled from the toxic barrier, hissing in confusion. Camden had stood inside his bone cathedral and laughed, the sound echoing across the ravine. He'd turned their own world against them. Weeks became months. Khaleesi's camp evolved into something unprecedented. She'd discovered that the local flora responded to electrical current. The ship's emergency battery became a tool for reshaping the jungle itself. Trees grew where she directed them, forming living walls. Bioluminescent fungi, cultivated and arranged, created patterns across the canopy that could be seen from orbit. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was announcing herself. The predators adapted. They began to observe rather than attack, studying this creature that bent their world to her will. Some grew bold, approaching the perimeter of her camp, but never crossing. Khaleesi started leaving scraps of food, not offerings, but experiments. She wanted to understand them as much as they wanted to understand her. One night, the largest predator she'd seen, a thing like a panther crossed with a mantis, all liquid muscle and scythe-like limbs, sat at the edge of her light. She named it Sentinel. It didn't attack. It simply watched, night after night, as if guarding her perimeter from other threats. "You're curious," Khaleesi said softly, not expecting understanding. "We're alike in that way." Camden's approach was more aggressive. He'd mapped the ravine, identified choke points and ambush sites. When the predators came, he was ready, not with weapons, but with traps that used the environment itself. Rock slides triggered by tripwires, sinkholes covered with false ground. He'd even trained one of the smaller species, a pack hunter with rudimentary intelligence, to sound alarm calls when larger predators approached. He wasn't surviving. He was conquering, but conquest was lonely. Some nights, staring at the alien stars, Camden wondered if Khaleesi had made it. If anyone had. The universe felt vast and empty, and he was a single point of defiance against the void. It was the beacon that changed everything. Khaleesi had repurposed her pod's emergency systems, amplifying the distress signal 100-fold. It drained her power reserves, but she broadcast continuously, a lighthouse in the cosmic dark. The pattern was unmistakably human prime numbers, mathematical constants, the building blocks of sapient thought. Camden picked it up on a salvaged receiver, nearly dropping the device in shock. The signal was close, planetary close. Someone else had survived. He began walking north. The journey took weeks. Camden moved through territories that had never known human passage, through predator nesting grounds and across rivers that ran with liquid methane. He left markers carved symbols on stone, arrangements of bone that pointed the way forward, breadcrumbs for a rescue that might never come, but also proof that humanity had been here. When he finally saw the lights, he thought he was hallucinating. The entire canopy glowed with bioluminescent patterns, geometric and precise. At the center, a camp that looked like a fortress, like a garden, like a promise that civilization could exist anywhere humans dared to dream it. Khaleesi saw him approach on her monitors, the cameras she'd fashioned from salvage tech. A figure, human, moving with purpose through her perimeter. Sentinel tensed but didn't attack, as if recognizing something familiar in the stranger's gait. She met Camden at the edge of her camp, both of them silent for a long moment. Around them, the predators of Carthax 7 watched from the shadows, no longer hunting, simply bearing witness. "I built a camp," Khaleesi said finally. Gesturing to the impossible garden around them, Camden smiled, exhausted and exhilarated. "I walked through hell to find it. Welcome home," she replied out above them. The predators that ruled this world had learned a new truth. Humans didn't survive by being the strongest or the fastest. They survived by transforming survival into art, into defiance, into hope. And in doing so, they'd built something even death worlds couldn't ignore.